The Denver Nuggets are arguably one of the most polarizing teams in the entire NBA this season. They have that smaller market type of fandom where their fans get upset when people don't talk about them enough in favor of the marquee teams around the league, and thankfully I seem to have avoided those fans being upset at me to a certain extent, as I do cover them fairly often. They also have one of the best records in the entire league when you combine both this season and last season. They have a legit first-team All-NBA caliber player and borderline MVP candidate in Nikola Jokic, and no shortage of interesting young guys around him as well. But the question is, as it always is with teams that haven't yet won a championship with their current group, is do they actually have what it takes to win a title? That's the question I hope to answer in today's video. How can the Denver Nuggets win the 2020 NBA championship? Okay, so as always with these videos, I want to start by talking about the pros and cons of the team, and then we'll get to the path later on to them potentially winning the title this season, right? So in terms of pros for the Nuggets, they're a balanced team, right? They're definitely in the top half of the league in terms of both offensive as well as defensive rating. They're 9th in offensive, 13th in defensive rating, and that's a good sign, right? Like you'd like to see them more, having both of those in the top 10 or maybe even both of them in the top 5 to be true legit, I really think they could win a championship this season type contenders, but that level of balance, being really good on both ends of the floor as opposed to just one, absolutely a positive thing, right? And so you have that balance, and you also have that depth. You have plenty of players throughout the roster, whether it's Michael Porter Jr., Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, Paul Millsap, Jeremy Grant, Plumlee, whoever it is, they can kind of get whatever they need out of any single player on the roster, right? They don't necessarily have a ton of guys that are really good at a bunch of different things, but they've got a ton of guys that are good at specific things, right? Like Monty Morris is going to come off the bench and he's going to run the second unit well, and he's going to play make, and he's going to make good decisions. He's going to be an efficient, scorer and shooter when he does decide to shoot the ball, right? Like Nikola Jokic is going to be the guy that everything runs through. That Jamal Murray is going to be a good playmaker. Gary Harris is going to be able to defend. That Paul Millsap is going to play both ends of the floor. Jeremy Grant is going to bring you energy. Same thing with Plumlee. So at least they know what they have in all their players, and they have the depth to get through a postseason series and to get through the playoffs, having all these different guys that they can plug and play depending on the matchup. And then of course the last pro for this team is they have Nikola Jokic, right? Like this guy, when he's right and when he is locked in, is one of the best 7 or 8 players in the entire league, depending on your ranking of whoever. Like this guy can absolutely be the entire motor of an offense. He can struggle at times defensively, right? Like he's never going to be an outstanding defender, but he provides so much value offensively, and you can really use him in a multitude of ways. He can be the guy that everything runs through as a passer. He can do some things in transition. He can do some things in the post. He can shoot from the outside, and having a guy like that definitely boosts their potential to win the championship. And then on the other side, in terms of cons, I'm sure you guys have heard this about the Denver Nuggets in the past. They don't have a history of playoff success with this current group. They struggled to even get out of the first round last year against a very good Spurs team. And then you can make the argument that, they almost beat the Portland Trail Blazers, who ended up going to the conference finals. But it's not like they almost beat one of the heavily favored teams in the conference to get to the conference finals, right? So struggles in the postseason last year certainly aren't a good sign for this season's team, at least as it relates to potentially winning the championship, right? And then the other part of this is the second option, the other guys outside of Nikola Jokic, and the first name that often comes up is Jamal Murray, and how effective he can be in the postseason and how good of a player he honestly just really is. Is he the second option just out of necessity for this team? And on a really good championship level team, is he more of a third option, or is he actually a legit, he can be the second best player on a championship level team? It's at the very least a question mark, right? And Jamal Murray is a good player. He's a very good scorer, playmaker, and is still growing and is still so young. So I don't want to completely write him off, but it is at least a question mark as of now until we see them and him specifically do some things on a legit level in the postseason. Those are absolutely fair criticisms. And then also, as it relates to Nikola Jokic, can he be the best guy on a championship level team, right? Like, can he be the guy with not being a great defender and honestly just being a big in general? Just the way that the league is now, when you need a shot late in the close game, you're going to be feeding Nikola Jokic in the post. Can you even get him the ball in the post, right? Or working out of wherever, is the way that they play, and specifically having him be the focal point of everything, is that something that's going to work in the playoffs? Now, we've had that argument about how many different play styles, right? Like you can't play up and down, you can't shoot, you can't do this, you can't do that and win a championship. And it's been proven wrong the minute that a team ends up winning the championship, right? But I think it's worth at least considering that having a big guy like that as your best player is questionable in terms of a strategy to win the championship in 2020 in the modern NBA. I think that's at very least, a fair criticism. And then the last thing that I want to bring up here is the shooting. And this is, as I talked about in the Lakers video for this series, this is probably one of the biggest indicators lately of teams that are going to be really good in the playoffs, make the conference finals, make the finals, and teams that are near the bottom of the league in the regular season in shooting, whether it's attempts, makes, or percentage from three-point range. They're going to struggle, and it's not a good sign, right? The Nuggets, as of right now, as of the recording of this video, are 25th in three-point makes, 26th in attempts, and 17th in percentage. And unlike the Lakers, there doesn't appear to be a huge lineup change that would allow them to increase those numbers in the postseason. The Lakers can move Anthony Davis to the 5 and have more spacing, and that's kind of their secret weapon. For the Nuggets, I don't necessarily know that they have something like that that's going to drastically change the way that they play, and this is just kind of who they are, right? Like, they're going to attack the rim, they're going to work a little bit more in the mid-range, and they're just not going to take as many threes as other teams, and that's a big concern for me as we get in the postseason. You're playing against teams that are a little bit more efficient with their shot selection, right? And their shot profile looks a little bit more modern compared to the Nuggets, and again, as you go back and look, teams that make the conference finals and the finals are generally in or near the top 10 during the regular season in all three of these categories: three-point makes, three-point attempts, and three-point percentage. And it's really important to note that the Nuggets are not only not within the top 10, they're not even remotely close in any of these categories. Okay, so with the pros and cons established, let's talk about how this can happen. How can the Nuggets actually win the championship this season? Well, the first thing is obvious. Nikola Jokic has to be the playoff MVP. He has to be fantastic. He has to be at the very least average defensively. He has to, depending on the matchup, morph into whatever this team needs from him, right? When they're playing the Rockets, he has to pummel them in the paint and absolutely destroy them and force them to realize that they made a mistake by trading away Clint Capella, not having a post defender. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying in an ideal world where the Nuggets are making a run to the finals, he has to be that level of guy. Where the Rockets are sitting there like, man, we really shouldn't have traded away Clint Capella because Nikola Jokic is a problem, right? And then against other teams, he needs to go back to being, the offensive focal point from the elbows and from the high post and doing all the different things from the outside and the inside that he does. He has to be able to morph between playoff series to be the kind of player that they need from him. And that is kind of what I mean by him being the playoff MVP, right? And then the other part of this is Jamal Murray needs to be fantastic. It's on him, in my opinion, to be the guy. Like, you can continue to hold out hope that Michael Porter Jr. is going to suddenly break out this season. I still think he's really good, but if we're talking about the playoffs and you're looking for a second option, it's got to be Jamal Murray, and he's got to put it all together. He's got to be efficient. He has to be a good playmaker. He has to not turn the ball over, and he has to make a ton of shots because he's the one guy that I think really is explosive from three-point range for this team, and I think that can really be the tipping point for them where suddenly we get in the postseason and they're in the top 4 of teams in the playoffs in those three-point categories because guys like Jamal Murray are hitting and taking a ton of threes. He has to be a true legit second option for this to actually happen for this team. And then as a team, they have to have a great shooting stretch, right? Like, these three-point numbers have to improve. They, as a team, need to go on a hot shooting stretch, at least compared to the regular season numbers, to really have a chance at this. Now, I do have question marks about every single part of this, right? Like, does Nikola Jokic have the endurance to do everything you need him to do in higher minutes and consistently from playoff series to playoff series? I don't know if he does. Does Jamal Murray have the skills necessary to be a high-level playoff scorer? I don't know. I'm questioning it, but those are the things that need to happen, right? And then in terms of matchups, they get to the conference finals or even in the second round, whoever they end up playing, and they just have better depth than the Lakers, right? They shoot better than them and they have better depth. They have more guys they can throw on the floor than the Lakers do, even though they don't have a better top 2, obviously, than the Lakers do. And in terms of the Clippers, again, these are the 2 teams that I think have the best chance of making the conference finals at this point. They just have more continuity. They're playing better together. And then you get to the finals and you're playing an Eastern Conference team. It just depends on the matchup. I think they would really struggle against Milwaukee, but I think they have a good shot against any of the other teams in the East. And you just kind of have to see how it goes from there. And even against Milwaukee, maybe they have guys like Paul Millsap and Jeremy Grant that could potentially do some things against Giannis, and then Jokic just pummels them in the paint. Even though Brook Lopez is a good paint defender, Jokic just goes to another level, right? And that's really what all this comes down to, is the ability of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray to be like a top 3 duo in the entire playoffs. If they can do that, then they've got a legit chance. Now, in my opinion, I don't think this is likely at all, and I don't I see them as a contender based off the standings, but I don't necessarily see them as like, oh, I really think that the Nuggets are going to make the finals. That's just not where I'm at with this team, and maybe it's unfair, but I'm just not seeing it from them, right? Like, it's not like they're not a good team. They're a good regular season team. I haven't seen it yet in the playoffs, and I want to see more out of them, and I really think that when this is going to unlock for them is going to be when Michael Porter Jr. develops a little bit more, and when some of the younger guys on the roster develop a little bit more as well, because they have a ton of potential moving forward. A lot of their guys are still so young. I think it's a little bit too early for them right now to be winning a championship. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.